Talk about scaling analytics to thousands of applications. The process of certifying applications and managing enterprise roles is spreadsheet driven today, and most companies are able to manage entitlement certification for a handful of applications. But the question everyone is asking is, how do we scale to thousands of apps? This presentation is about how Oracle Identity Analytics can enable businesses to make the process repeatable and sustainable, orchestrate certification review campaigns, and measure progress. So quickly, I want to start out and talk a little bit about the agenda. First of all, I want to set a baseline by talking about the enterprise certification requirements and how they're changing. Then I want to discuss the challenge of scale. While we were certifying a handful of applications that were sort of financially relevant today, tomorrow we've got to certify more applications than we have in the past. I then want to talk about how organizations are adapting and how the tool provides unique sort of tactical capabilities to help organizations adapt. And then I want to talk about some of our learning experiences from doing this in the past. To start with, the big problem today is that it's ad hoc. The process of certifying entitlements typically begins with extracting those entitlements from lots of different systems like mainframes, databases, ERP systems. The challenge is that it's a one-off process, and the process is done by each application owner because it's largely human dependent. It takes lots of time and it's not repeatable. After that data is captured in a spreadsheet, it typically goes through a review process. Someone actually has to email that out, or there's an automated process for emailing out the entitlements for each individual manager or business owner. The challenge here is this is complex because as a business owner gets a spreadsheet of entitlements, they don't have a data dictionary, it's difficult to understand, and the process is often error prone. There are lots of cases where business owners are certifying access for users that are no longer at the organization because you get a lot of rubber stamping. So with this complexity today, there's a lot of dissatisfaction among end users on being able to do certification review on a repeated basis. And while most organizations today are trying to do it quarterly, they end up being successful at doing it every 6 months or sometimes even longer than that. So how do we correlate our results? The challenge is once a business owner certifies access, that typically turns into an email back to an audit group or a security group that then has to correlate those results back into something meaningful. And the challenge becomes, well, you've got lots of different systems. A user on one system has a different ID across multiple systems, and what makes it even more challenging is the entitlements are different across systems. So while you're looking at a user who may potentially have a separation of duties conflict between one system and another, it becomes very difficult to resolve. And to make matters worse, the challenge of then fixing the access review is even more cumbersome because now what happens is all of the changes that are requested by a business owner has to be put into a help desk queue for someone to actually make those changes manually. The challenge here is it's not verifiable. So the process today, it's ad hoc. It's basically a one-off basis that's being done manually. It's complex for the end user as they try to certify millions of entitlements. For the security and auditor, it is unauditable. They don't have accurate reporting and historical reporting. And then finally, at the end of the process, in order to fix violations, it's really not verifiable. It could take weeks or even months to actually get a remediation process conducted. So again, it's manual and it's expensive. While organizations were focused on a handful of applications in the past that were financially relevant, today they're focused on more applications than ever before. In fact, they're focused on the underlying systems themselves, databases, etc. And if you look at it today, we've got thousands of systems in the organization. On top of that, you have tens of thousands of applications. And on top of that, we have hundreds of thousands of users and millions of entitlements. At an application level, we're providing providing more and more applications to our end users, and some of those applications are even in the cloud. So the volume of applications is just increasing. Also, with regard to users, we're allowing more and more users into the organization today than we have in the past. So the volume and the number of users that we have to certify is increasing. And then at the end result, you've got millions of entitlements out there. So where we weren't looking at access to certain things in the past, we're now scrutinizing those even more in depth. The administrators have the challenge of trying to reduce cost. They're focused on reducing risk, but the volume is so large. And where organizations were doing certification review campaigns sort of sequentially in a quarterly basis, today they're being driven to do them on a rolling or monthly attestation basis. So the frequency of the audit is increasing, the audits are a bit more intrusive, they're larger in scale than they were in the past. You really have just a handful of administrators. The volume of administrators today isn't necessarily increasing, and in order to fix all of these compliance issues and all the remediation, you've got a handful of help desk staff that have to take action and remediate any sort of access review issues. And the process of adapting means scaling, and by focusing on the humanly challenging problems and simplifying the user experiences, Oracle Identity and Analytics can address the problem. So the first thing Oracle Identity Analytics does is it optimizes the ETL process. Instead of being one-off scripts that are run by an application owner, Oracle Identity Analytics makes these scheduled and automated so that they are repeatable. End users are a critical part of the process. So looking at the time it takes for a manager to certify users and how long it takes to certify an individual user is critical. We need to put ourselves in the perspective of the end user. And so Oracle Identity Analytics focuses on how to minimize the amount of time it takes to certify an individual user account. And one of the ways it does that is to prioritize based on risk. So a manager can actually look at all of the certification reviews in his or her inbox and quickly prioritize which are sort of lower risk, which are higher risk and medium risk, and be able to make educated decision based on having forensics at their fingertips. It's critical to automate the remediation because remember, you only have a handful of application administrators and a handful of help desk staff. Being able to automate the remediation so you have instant closed loop remediation is critical. In order to scale, Oracle Identity Analytics provides role management. Instead of a user certifying millions of entitlements, managers can focus on certifying a handful of roles. And because Oracle Identity Analytics includes a role lifecycle management, organizations can be certain that you don't have a role explosion problem happening after the fact. But it's all about reducing the number of audit findings. So providing a preventative way to reduce the number of audit findings means looking at the user life cycle and preventing violations before they happen. Most of the violations can be prevented if they were caught in the provisioning lifecycle, and Oracle Identity Analytics combines with Oracle Identity Manager for a preventative and detective solution. One of the things we have done here is to benchmark it for large scale. So we look at attributes like the number of resources and the tens of thousands, the number of certifications per campaign, the number of business units involved in the certification, and looking for large volumes of users and large volumes of entitlement. We quickly are able to extract the data, transform it, load it into Oracle Identity Analytics and into the warehouse by providing a flexible data mapping capability so that the entitlements can be quickly mapped into the warehouse. It also provides the capability for a rolling data import so that instead of having a one-off sort of sequential import, data import can be a continuous process, which means organizations can have continuous certification reviews instead of quarterly sequential certification reviews. We focused on allowing for large volume remediation because as changes come into the entitlements and managers request user access to be changed, the remediation has to be able to provide the same amount of volume. And that's done by combining Oracle Identity Analytics with Oracle Identity Manager.